just to keep it really interactive. So yeah, Peter's already covered this. Interestingly, when I first put this presentation together, PowerPoint just automatically picked this picture on the left of these skydivers. And I just thought that's really intuitive of PowerPoint, because I feel often as freelancers, sometimes we can feel like these people diving through the air on our own and free falling a little bit at times. So yeah, the 4 areas we're going to cover are managing self-doubt. I'm going to cover that and talking about coping with downtime. I'm actually also going to cover coping with the uptime, because I think that can be equally as difficult to handle as when we're quiet, when we're super busy, how we can get a bit overwhelmed. And then I'm going to hand over to Jane, who's going to talk through the managing clients and underpricing and overpromising. So quite an ambitious agenda to fit into sort of 50 minutes, but we'll do our best. So I think a lot of you probably know Jane. I'll let her introduce herself to you in a minute. But as Peter said, my background is in research. I started out as a freelancer myself in 2005 when I was a new mum and didn't really want to go back into the craziness of research world, going out and doing focus groups 3-4 nights a week. And then that just happened to build up into quite a big agency, which I then exited a couple of years ago, and I'm back in the freelancing space, but working more on my company is called Culture and Candor, and working more into personal growth, personality profiling, but also small business growth as well. Jane, do you want to tell them about yourself?
Yeah, so I think a lot of you know me, but my background is in client services in the advertising agency for too many years. I won't even mention the figure, it's embarrassing. So about 2 years ago, in a bit of a lull, where I went into a year with kind of very little business, I said, I need to upskill. And I did the Kingston College executive coaching and mentoring, and went, oh, I was meant to do this, because I've been inadvertently doing a lot of training with agencies and younger people coming up through the ranks. So I just absolutely love that course, and I'm kind of sidestepping into that, but I still do my advertising gigs. So I have a nice mix, but that also keeps you in touch with everything that's going on the client side, and it can then feed into when you're actually doing your mentoring and coaching. So Julie and I then, because somebody introduced us, I think it was it Anne Claire?
Anne Claire, yeah.
Have to meet. And we met and had a coffee in Blanchardstown Shopping Centre. And sometimes when you're doing these kind of meetups, you're going, why am I meeting this person? And I love Julie the minute I met her. And I think it's just always, and she has skill sets that I don't have. And I think that when you just have a good synergy, we decided, well, let's do this as a sidebar piece of business. And it's working out very well so far. So that's me.
Yeah, and we went a bit to a slightly nicer location for our second meet, and that's the picture from that in the Castle Knock Hotel. We moved up from Starbucks or whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to kick off talking a little bit about imposter syndrome, and this is where I want you to kind of have a look at some of these statements that, you know, some of the how this might come to life in the, you know, as a freelancer. And I want you to kind of look at these, and maybe in the chat box just to put in, so if any of these resonate with you. There might be one or two, but which one resonates the most with you? So I'm really here just to normalize imposter syndrome. It's not some mad thing that's like, oh my God, that, you know, if I say I have imposter syndrome, it means I have zero confidence. It's actually pretty normal to have, you know, good to feel vulnerable at times. And, you know, we learn from our vulnerability and where we feel inadequate. You know, we have to look at that and grow from it. But it's when it becomes a blocker, when it is actually stopping us from reaching out for our goals, you know, when the self-doubt takes over, you know, or when we push ourselves so much that we experience things like burnout. So, you know, some people, you know, feel that they need to be the expert in everything, and unless they're accredited or, you know, fully done, you know, 10 courses on something, they you know, won't go for certain jobs, for example. Any of these resonating with anyone? Anything coming through in the chat there, Jane?
Not yet. I've just put soloist in for myself, because when we were going through this yesterday, for me, I work way too much on my own and I'm not inclined to reach out. So it would be great to hear from you guys if you can put in the chat box who you resonate most with. Okay, Amanda Maury is saying the perfectionist. Oh, a lot of perfectionists. Anna can relate to them all. Superhero, the expert, the perfectionist. Okay, interesting. So I'm definitely a bit of a loner. That's interesting. Okay, lots of perfectionists coming up, and the expert as well.
I find if I'm not naturally brilliant, it's something I tend to veer away from it. That would be one that I would go to sometimes in my head, you know. But you know, maybe that's just like, oh, I don't really want to have to go and study it at times. But I think that's one I go for. If it doesn't come to me immediately, I'm like, oh no, that's not for me. So yeah, it's perfectly normal. I think when we first put up, you know, on LinkedIn, when Peter put up the chat, I think James Dunn said something like, you know, if you don't have imposter syndrome at some time, does that not mean that you're a sociopath or something? I think it's just so normal. There's stats that go around saying that 82% of people feel some of these, but I would think it's probably even higher than that, you know, we're all going to have those feelings of self-doubt. But as I said, you know, when it starts to get, you know, you might experience some of these in different contexts. So in one context, you might have a little bit of imposter syndrome in terms of being perfect. In another, you know, you might be, you know, the superhero. And I do think there probably are more soloists, you know, here than you think, because I think there's lots of things, like, for example, for me, I can struggle sometimes if I have an IT issue, and I could lose 3 hours trying to fix an IT issue, whereas I could probably pay someone, you know, €50 and they would solve it in 10 minutes, you know. So there's those sorts of things, I think, you know, that we, in those contexts, we can be a little bit, no, I'll just do it myself. So yeah, how do we overcome these? So here are some self-doubt antidotes, because it is more about self-doubt. And I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey. I don't know if anyone's read the 7 Habits of effective people, but I'll probably touch on those quite a bit when we're chatting today. But he said, if I really want to improve my situation, I can work on the one thing over which I have control, myself. And, you know, we all look, I'm sure there's a lot of really experienced freelancers here, and myself and Jane, you know, have many years behind us, too many that we're willing, more than we're willing to admit to. But I think, you know, we all have to catch ourselves sometimes having this negative self-talk. When times are quiet, for example, you know, we can often say things like, oh, you know, it's obviously just quiet out there. You know, it's a bad time of year, it's seasonal, everyone's on holiday, you know. And or sometimes we could also say things like, you know, oh, I don't know if I'm, you know, I can do that, or I can't, or clients won't, or, you know, we're not using proactive language, and we just need to catch that in the moment and reframe it and say things like, I can, they will. Use proactive language rather than kind of blockers and barriers, and we can quite easily slip into that habit of using sort of negative self-talk. And we really need to be kind to ourselves. You know, we need to be kind and not expect huge amounts from ourselves. Like, we are human, we have our flaws. I love the term flawsome, which means, you know, we're awesome, but we also have flaws, and that's perfectly normal. Sometimes as well, we can set ourselves ridiculous goals. Like, you know, they say that it takes 3 years really to kind of build your reputation up and build your business. So if you're newer to freelancing, don't be expecting wonders in year 1 and set a target of bringing in 150,000 or something. You know, we need to set achievable goals and you know, build on them. And if we have one huge goal, that's fine, but then we need to chunk it out into smaller goals. There's another book called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? And it's all about how we can achieve success by breaking it down into little steps that we move up. Don't be afraid to seek support. You know, if you find yourself getting down, if you find that you're kind of floundering or kind of feeling that you're not, you know, progressing, or that you're, you know, there's blockers there from, you're missing out on opportunities, or, you know, you're feeling bad seeing other people achieve and you're not quite there yet, then seek support from, you know, whoever it may be. You know, I've had a coach. Jane's had a coach, you know, and it's one of the best things I've ever done, really. But also, you know, you may have a family member you can go to, you may have friends. Sometimes when we go to friends, though, they try and fix you and they tell you what to do. You know, whereas when you go to a coach or a mentor, it's really about helping you arrive at the, you know, discover your own journey and, you know, what's comfortable for you, and how, you know, really discovering your own opportunities from within. And, you know, channeling resilience. We all need to be resilient as freelancers, because, you know, the ups and downs of freelancer life, which we'll talk about as well, you know, can be pretty crazy at times, you know. And, you know, we need to also know that, you know, if we don't win something, if we pitch for something and we put ourselves forward for something, if we don't win them, we need to go, right, okay, I can learn from that. You know, I can take whatever happened, get feedback and learn and grow. You know, we need to celebrate failures rather than letting them drag us down. And you know that there's all an opportunity for growth and learning, but equally we also need to celebrate our achievements, and sometimes we don't do that enough. So we just sort of just fob it off. Oh yeah, look, yeah, I did that. You know, I created this campaign, or I did that, or whatever. You know, it doesn't. You know, it's just another thing that I did. We need to celebrate them and journal them. So journal your successes, journal your failures. And, you know, in times when you might be feeling a little bit low, you can look back at that journal and go, oh, I did that and I achieved that and I, you know, learned that and I did that. And it's actually a really good method for just kind of keeping yourself level and not letting yourself go down.
A quick one, Julie. Peter just
Yeah.
has a question in, which is a good one, and you've touched on it. Is it better to have neutral support rather than someone who knows you? And I think you've answered that question. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I coach a lot of people. I'm coaching someone who's a bit of a careers crossroads, and they mentioned to me that they're getting advice from all their friends and family, and it's all very conflicting and it's really confusing them, because people try to fix the problem and try to say, do this and don't do that, you know, hand your notice in, don't hand your notice in, and it just becomes very confusing. It has to come from within. You know, you have to do what is right for you, or what is right for them in that situation.
Like, I chose a mentor, by the way, to all the group. I chose a mentor I met at a lunch I was at last year, and she was a Polish lady. You probably would see a lot of her content on LinkedIn, and I picked her deliberately because I knew she'd be hard. And I don't mean hard in a bad way. She just wouldn't let me away with anything. And when you go to a coach, you kind of need that. And she's very helpful. I've had 2 sessions with her and I have 2 more to go to, but I found her really good, and she kind of unearthed something that I wouldn't admit, because unfortunately there's things you just won't admit with friends, and you need to do it neutrally with someone else.
Yeah, we all have our blind spots. We all have our blind spots, and you know, a good mentor or coach will help you uncover what they are and work through them, which is what I'm really leads me quite nicely onto mindset. So, has anyone heard of spotlight profiling or spotlight personality? Has anyone done their own spotlight? No. So there's a lot of people might have done some sort of personality profiling before, and often, you know, then come back and tell me that they're a red, a green, a yellow, or whatever it is. And there's a lot of baggage that comes with personality profiling. So we use this tool, it's Spotlight by Mindflick, and really their kind of thinking around this is that we all have preferences in terms of our mindsets and our behaviors, but we have a blend of preferences, and there's no best preference. You know, we are a blend of probably all of these things, and I'll talk to you how this is made up, because you know it's all around. It's built on the. I'm going to look at the name of it now because I'll get sensitivity reinforcement theory. So the 2 aspects of our mindset are sensitivity to reward. So you can see that little orange block on the right, and sensitivity to threat, which is the cat. So you have to imagine that you're the mouse and you're in your little enclave at the side of the wall, and you either tap into a mindset of all I can smell is the cheese and you want to go for the cheese, and that would mean that you'd probably be highly sensitive to the cheese, but low sensitivity to the cat, because you're not thinking about what the cat might do to you. So that would mean that you'd have, you know, a preference for a more optimistic mindset. An engaged mindset would mean that you have sensitivity to both. So you're quite alert and reactive and ready to kind of adapt if the cat comes along. If you look at the prudent mindset, that's likely to be a high sensitivity to the cat, to the threat, and a low sensitivity to the reward. So they would be quite, you know, kind of planning and really careful about things. And then a contained mindset is low sensitivity to reward and low sensitivity to threat. So they would be, you know, quite calm. So keep calm and carry on. So what I want to do is, I suppose, is get people to understand. First of all, I want you to maybe kind of put into the chat box if you think that you are you have a preference for an optimistic. So what would you lead with? What would your go-to mindset be? You know, are you this, I get a strong smell of the cheese and I go for it? I'm kind of equally kind of thinking about the cat and the cheese, I'm getting a whiff of both? Or are you, I get a whiff of cat and, you know, I'm very careful about things. So it'd be interesting to see what you think you are in terms of like your blend of preferences. What would be your lead preference?
So Geraldine is optimistic and engaged. Thank you, Geraldine. No surprises there. And actually, Peter's quickly asking, is there an online link to this that people can check their own profiles? I don't think there is, Julie. It's a
no, there's not. No,
yeah.
It's not a free one. It's not a free tool that you can use. It's something that you do, but I think you can get a fairly good idea from just thinking about how you react to things, to seeing the prize. Do you run for that, or do you think about the things that might get in the way of getting that prize? And you can kind of start to see the mindset preferences that you have.
Yeah, there's a few coming in optimistic, and people are understanding that they're a bit of both. Like I did it last week, and I am I think contained and optimistic, you know. Yeah, so everyone has a mix of it. It's very interesting when you do it properly.
Yeah, so a lot of freelancers and people who work for themselves often have an optimistic preference. But the reason I'm showing this is that it's about adapting. It's about, you know, we have to play to our strengths, and optimism is great, but we also have to think about, well, where do we need to tap into the other mindsets? And just, you know, as part of that, I'm going to get you to have a think about this, right? So I'm going to go back to that slide in a minute, but this is the chat that I want to get going, okay? What would happen with these different mindsets if you were to climb a mountain, okay? So if you were to climb a mountain with the prudent mindset, what would that mean? If you were to climb a mountain, what would the different mindsets bring to this journey up the mountain? Okay, so just, you know, have a think about it. Tell me if you think of something. What would the optimistic mindset or preference bring to going up the mountain?
Peter says it would take ages. So it is interesting. I climbed Carrantoul about 10 years ago. If Catherine Mars on the call, she remembered this. And I'm a very optimistic person and engaged in all of that. But I became a very prudent, hysterical person on the mountain, because as I was scaling these walls, I went, I have to come back down as well. And so I became utterly prudent, which was not really in my nature. So I found it quite terrifying. So it's funny, my optimistic mindset disappears.
Yeah. Anyone feel that they're veering towards, you know, contained or prudent?
We have engaged from Lisa Gernan, and we have from Rose optimistic, keep looking to the summit, which is really the best way to do it. Very good.
Yeah, Olive, did you nod there to the prudent or the contained? Oh, I can't hear you, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, contained. You just keep going. Smile and keep going.
Yeah.
So basically, when we do the exercise in the groups, you know, it's interesting to see what might you benefit from having how might you benefit from having a prudent mindset, or tapping into a prudent mindset when climbing a mountain. A lot of people on mute, so if you're talking, you might take your mic off.
Prudent, wear the right clothes. I love it, Rose. Very good. The right gear, says Jer.
Exactly.
And Claudine, I've climbed mountains, get contained when I get tired.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll want to keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. So you can see how at times, like if we were to set out with a very optimistic mindset going up a mountain, we might have great crack, but we might get to the top, but we might not have thought about getting back down again to the bottom. We might not have thought about the supplies we need. You know, what happens if we meet a lake? What happens if we, you know, meet some ice, or, you know, whereas the prudent mindset might have thought ahead. The prudent mindset's probably checking the weather 3 weeks beforehand. I mean, the prudent mindset might not even go up the mountain, let's be honest. They might just stay at the bottom and go, no, there's too many threats, there's too many things that might go wrong. But each mindset brings something to the table. So the contained mindset is going to bring that calmness when things are going wrong. The prudent mindset is going to bring the preparation. The engaged mindset is going to be the reacting in the moment when things change. And the optimistic mindset is going to be the one that keeps everyone, kind of going when times get tough, because they're going to be optimistic about it. So we are all a little blend of these, but we do have a very strong preference, usually to one or two of these. And then we have to then try and adapt our ways of thinking and our mindset to tap into some of the areas that, maybe don't come as naturally to us. So, I think adaptability is really important as a freelancer. We might need at times to have more of a contained preference. We might need to tap into a prudent preference. We might have different clients who might react better if we think about a different preference and how they are and mirror their preferences a little bit. So it's all about, so this, I love this quote, which all my boxes are in the way of. Being adaptable requires us not to get overly wedded to our own worldview, and instead to have the humility to appreciate the many different ways the same situation can be viewed from. So again, it's back to the Covey, who says seek first to understand, and that's what he says, and then to be understood. So I think that kind of fits in nicely as well. But we need to purposely consider situations as if from the perspective of others. Anything to add there, Jane?
No, just working on counterweight. So I learned from doing the profile last week that my counterweight is definitely, my weaker area might be prudent. So I need to bring that in more. So it's a great highlighter for me that maybe moving forward with a lot of things, I need to be a bit more prudent. I'm inclined to rush in,
Yeah, we all have strengths, and when we're at our best, we're using our strengths. But if we overplay our strengths, it can become a weakness. It is two sides of a coin. Our strengths can become our weaknesses, and sometimes when we underplay our strengths, we would say that we're operating with the handbrake on. So we're not really bringing the best out of ourselves. But the counterweights are there to kind of go, right, okay, I need to dial back in this. Someone who's optimistic might be seen sometimes as reckless because they make really impulsive decisions. So, that's how your strength can flip over and potentially become a weakness. So it's important that we kind of learn to adapt then. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the roller coaster of freelance life. I've got my little emojis here. I've got my little dancing one when we're at the top, when we're kind of down at the bottom and doesn't seem we're going to go back up again with a little sad face. And then, when we're going back up, we have a happy face. And I think that, we do need to embrace the roller coaster. It is freelance life. Well, it certainly has been for me over even running a business as well. A small business would have been similar enough. But I think sometimes, I've put the dance emoji at the top of the roller coaster, but actually you could also put a brain fry emoji there as well, because sometimes when we have, so much on, it can become quite overwhelming. And I think managing the super highs is as important as managing the downtime. So I've just put some little tips in there in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, don't be afraid to ask for help and support. Consider outsourcing some things. Like as freelancers, always like, no, I need it all for myself, but actually reaching out and working with other people can be quite beneficial at times. Consider saying no. I've had a really busy period over the last 6 weeks, and I've actually turned a couple of things down because it just would have been mad for me to take anything more on. And then we also always need to work on our time management. And in that, there's a great tool which some of you may know about, which is the, what jobs have I got to do that are important, not important, urgent, not urgent. And we look at it from that angle, and then that helps us sort out what we need to do. Lots of different, I could do a whole talk on time management, but that's not for today. And then what you're here to do is talk about the downtime. And I love this picture on the right, because we often, when we're quiet or whatever, we just sit at our computer and like bash out a few emails and they go, I need to work on this and work on that and work on this and bring the work in and bring the money in. And we're just really focusing on the problem of not having enough work. And that means we're not looking up and around at the opportunities around us. And I've always found that when it is quiet, there's usually a busy time around the corner. And often we don't take the time to kind of go enjoy that quiet time and go, why did I, work my butt off when I was quiet, when I should have just taken a bit time for myself. We can also get into that kind of negative thinking, as I talked about earlier, you know, oh, it's a bad time of year, nobody's busy, nobody's, you know, taking people on, nobody's doing this. And we start getting into that negative language again. And we need to think about, you know, this is a positive, this is time for me to think and grow. When I started up my business with my former business partner, we hit the recession straight away. And it was like, well, what did we do? And we went off to a conference in Prague. We picked up lots of new ideas and techniques. We came back, we packaged them up, and we saw it as a challenge and an opportunity for us to differentiate ourselves in the market. So we didn't sit there going, oh, this is crap, you know, the recession's hit, there's no work. We actually thought, right, how do we pivot to stand out from everyone else and get the work that is there? So it's really important to try and reframe things as a positive. Take the time to grow and learn. You know, there's LinkedIn learning, there's, you know, read books. That can often kind of re-energize ourselves when we're feeling a bit low, or when work isn't coming in. You know, look at sort of mini micro courses that you can do. There's so much that you can do in terms of kind of your own personal growth and learning. But just, you know, look up and around at the opportunities. We'll talk a little bit about, Jane's going to talk a little bit about pushing ourselves out of the comfort zone a little bit. And, you know, use the 7 habits, be and talk proactively. And sharpen the saw is one of another one of Covey's 7 habits. And that's really all about kind of getting, you know, balance and renewing ourselves. If I sit at the computer, you know, I often don't come up with many creative ideas. If I go and walk the dog for 20 minutes, it's when all my ideas come to me, because I'm actually just giving myself time to think. And that's so important, that we give ourselves the time to think. Do you have anything to add there?
Julie?
No,
Julie,
yeah.
Just a feedback on the little poll that we're running. So just the latest on that question of what do you do during the downtime. So updating my portfolio is number 1. That's 55% of the 22 people who have responded so far. Getting my finances in order is the second one. And then after that, it's a combination of developing some additional skills or prospecting new clients. That seems to be the focus of certainly half the group that we have here, yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. So that covers off a few of those. And then I think just take time to yourself and, you know, give yourself a little bit of breathing space as well. Yeah, look up and around at the opportunities would be the main thing. I think this is my final chart, which is really, I think Jane's going to cover in a little bit more detail. I'm going to pass over to her now. But the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And sometimes we hold ourselves back, particularly if we're kind of experienced, we're not the expert, or we have to be perfect at everything. If we actually just are kinder to ourselves and look at what we've achieved and celebrate our successes, learn from our failures, then we can push ourselves a little bit into that cave that has a bit more treasure there for us to grab. So I will hand over to Jane now.
Perfect. So guys, I'm going to talk a little bit about managing clients, but I think you all are probably pretty good at doing that at this stage. But sometimes it is like herding cats. We have to, I think when you start the relationship with the client is where you kick off and do 80% of the work. And I think if you can set the parameters with your clients from the very start, it makes the rest of it so much easier. A lot of people say to me in the business, and I've said over the years, how are you so calm about it, Jane? I'm like, because I lay down everything at the beginning, know what I'm doing, do my timelines, get my costings done, and then it makes the project and the relationship with the client so much easier. Otherwise, you're walking into a whole ambiguous kind of space, and things can get out of control pretty quickly. So Julie, you might flick on there. Thanks a million. To me, it all goes back to how you start your day. You might go, oh, why does that matter? It really does. Yesterday morning, bank holiday Monday, I went on a session with Julie. We were flicking through this and I was in a mood and didn't want to do it because it's the bank holiday. And then, but I rant for about a minute and then I move on, and we did our session yesterday. But like this morning, I started the day. I'm a real believer in this, having a routine, and I'm sure you all do. But I got up, I did 15 minutes yoga on my mat. I came down, wrote my list, for the day, made my coffee, and then you just go into, it just adds a completely different perspective to your day in how you started, because we all know if we start with a negative thought, it just can completely ruin your day, or your day goes out of control. So I'm just a really big believer in starting your day with kind of good routines. And if you can flick on there, Colette, lovely. They're basic things that I'm saying here, guys, but I keep having to remind myself every week. I'm a big believer in Denise Kenny Burns, all her products, you're probably aware of them, the planners and the head plans, and they really work very well, because not only on your list, everyone has a list, but not only on your list, you're writing down a daily affirmation, your top 3 priorities. Today was the main goal for today was doing a good session. That was my main focus, but I have a load of other things to do this afternoon. But I'm always looking at new business. I have a projection sheet I look at the beginning of the week to go, what am I trying to achieve this month financially? And because otherwise you're sitting there passively and you're waiting for the phone to ring, but you have to be continuously proactive. I'm just a real believer in that. So I will have a list of people I'm going to drop a note to, or 1 or 2 cups of coffee I might want to have with people. And that might mean traveling into town, and you're like, oh God, do I have 3 hours to do that? It is so worth it, because it just is life affirming to chat to other people, as we know, whether or not a piece of business comes out of it. And that's what I've done all my life. So I absolutely refuse to live in the kind of fearful zone that we can be in as freelancers. If you set a proper plan and you're strategic about the way you approach your day and your week, it's much better. So I would look at my diary on Monday, like for example, today I have a new client, but I gave them my not available time today as a kind of going into their diary, so they know I'm not free for calls. I always build a timeline or a critical path for a piece of work. That's how I started. And then I can immediately start populating the tasks, who I need to contact. Now, this is all basic stuff, guys, but it applies to if you're designers, web designers, if you are writing copy, if you're client services. If you start off organized, you become the leader of the whole project, rather than waiting passively for things to happen. And it removes for me any ambiguity from the project. But that's how I approach my life as well. Like, trust me, I don't have the whole year population with business. Don't worry, Julie. I don't have the whole year populated with business, but I do have a figure of what I want to achieve by the end of the year, and I'll try and get there. And I may end up 3/4 of the way there, and that's absolutely fine. But it's really good to set your goals. So if you could flick on there, Julie, thanks a million. So for me, I'm a really big mover in moving out of my comfort zone. I do it all the time. I think I got that from my dad. I think a lot of that is hereditary. He was always pushing forward, doing new things, trying new things. So you don't pick it up off the ground, but you can train your mind to be like that. I'm a real believer in shifting mindsets. And that's one of the main things I learned through the course that I did. You can just completely change your day, your week, your month by flicking the way you think. And by doing that, and by getting out of your comfort zone, you extend your network, you build further resilience. Like even today, doing today's piece of content, I suggested to Peter, or I sent on to Peter a link to what myself and Julie were doing. And then I said, do you want me to do a bit of content as well? So Peter's always glad to have content for the indie list. So I nearly told him I was going to do it. So this is the way life is. And I'm sure, Peter, I hope it's of use when you get moving forward with content. But you know, push yourself to do it. I bet you there's a few of you on this call who want, or all of you, in fact, who could do a session on whatever you're doing. So do it, suggest it to Peter, or go onto other networks. And I did 1 or 2 of them last year on Eventbrite. And I got a number of people, maybe not a huge group, maybe not like today's group, but it's just continuously making you practice your speaking skills, what you're delivering, and just sharing your own experience. And anyone can do it, but you do have to plan and you do have to practice. So don't wait for it to happen. All of you probably have great potential to do it. And it's great for your self-confidence. And that's why working with Julie, I just find I need that other person to bolster me along, and she will push me in some directions. And, you know, this is what it's all about.
Yeah, there's a question there saying, out of interest, how do you add clients to your non-applicable time?
How do you add clients to your?
Is that what you had in
sorry,
your
so
previous
what I do
slide?
is I
Add clients to your anytime so they know clearly when you're not free.
So this morning I have a new client, and I sent them all an email and said not available between 9
Oh, not
and 10.
available. Sorry, I thought it was
Not available. Sorry, that's how I do it. So they understand, and I'm not getting calls. And it's okay. It's time blocking. It's okay to do that. So basically, guys, just what kind of relationship do you want with your client? There's two ways to approach a relationship with your client. If you can flick on there, Judy, thanks a million. You're either having a transactional, functional relationship with your client where you're waiting for them to call, you're getting the job, you're quoting them, you're doing the job. And instead, and I'm sure you all do this, but I'd encourage you to say, what's the year looking like for you? What are the challenges for the business? Are there any other ways I can plug in? It's like ask a lot of open-ended questions. So I'm just going to look at the characteristics on the next slide there, Julie, of transactional versus rich relationships. So when we're busy, we all do this. We focus on the single sale. We're inclined to go, okay, that's a script I have to write or a piece of design. I'll do that. Here's the quote. I'll have it done in a week, and then I'll wait around for my next client. And you've kind of a limited commitment to them, maybe or not. And then you do a lot of emailing. My belief is that to grow a rich relationship, you have to discuss long-term opportunities with them. Even just throw out, you don't have to ask for their strategic plan or know everything about their business, but just find out a little bit more and suggest things to them. It's like that whole idea of you're putting a little seed in their mind, and they might take it on board and come back to you the next week and go, you know what you were saying about refreshing my website? We might get you to have a look at that as well. So always think in terms of longer timescales and in terms of having that client forever. And also, that client can give you a nice, recommendation that you can put on your website, and it all just begets, it attracts business. Because if you're stuck in that transactional relationship, it's a little bit, you're in a state of lack. But if you're creating a richer conversation every time you talk to them, it's becoming something much bigger. Now, you mightn't have line of sight of it, you mightn't know when those jobs will come in, but you're just building a richer relationship with that client. And I have found that has helped me a lot with clients I've had where they might start small or they grow, but they come back as a repeat business. This is stuff you all know, guys, but this is just a reminder of how important it is. Also, pick up the phone. I'm doing a lot of client services training at the moment, and the younger people in the business do not pick up the phone to their clients. They're just constantly emailing them. It's like keeping someone at arm's length. And sometimes phone conversations are awkward. I don't like being on the phone myself. I prefer emails because they're more structured, but having a bit of a call can tear things up much quicker. So I just really, really encourage you to do that, and especially to any younger people on this call or on this session. So we all know what we need to do when we're familiarizing ourselves with clients, but you should know their industry. Like I'm working on a client at the moment, and at the beginning of the year, it's an electric car.
Sorry, my Mac is a bit oversensitive today.
No problem. No problem, Judy. Just stop with the vodka drinking in the middle of the Really, you're getting over your cold.
I've been caught. And then a water bottle.
So just, for example, at the beginning of the year, I was looking at the market, and because of everything that's happening with the various wars, and what's happening with the EV market was dropping by about 23%. And I could see that at the beginning of the year. And I said, we need to have a session with our client to see what other things can we do for them that aren't about a big media spend. So as a freelancer, you still have to keep an eye on those things, because in this agency, they went, well, we shouldn't really be highlighting the negatives. And I'm like, we absolutely need to highlight the negatives, because we need to look at other things that we can do for that client while they're in a downtime. And that worked out really well. Know their long-term objectives. So that's really about knowing their strategic plan. Try and read it. If they send you documents, I know it can be a bit boring, but read it, get a sense of where they're at or where they're trying to go to, know their target audience. These are all kind of basic stuff. But asking open-ended questions, especially as freelancers, are really key. So when you do get them on the phone and they're giving you the brief for the job, keep them on the phone and find out, is there anything else coming up that you could work work with them on, and get familiar with previous work that they've done and the kind of standards they've achieved, and could you improve it, etc., and always understand the scope of work for the project, because I'm a real believer that 80% of the work is done in the first week, and then once you've everything lined up, everything flows kind of smoothly. And I'm talking to you from a client services perspective here. I know you all are freelancers, but you can still apply this to the way you're dealing with your clients.
Yeah.
And maybe the next one, Julie.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. In terms of asking open-ended questions, as a market researcher, that's obviously a huge one for me. But it's also about active listening. So there's 3 levels of listening. There's level 1, where we're kind of asking a question to respond, but we need to ask questions to really listen and understand. And level 3 listening would be kind of listening to everything, what people are saying, how they're responding, their tone, their body language, their just general demeanor. So really it takes quite a lot of effort to go to kind of level 3 listening, but we really definitely need to be in level 2 or level 3 listening when we're asking our clients questions or asking people questions. So it's just something to add there.
Malcolm, as you say, what Malcolm Gladwell says, it's about knowing without knowing. So get a sense when you're on a call with a client, there's loads of things going on. And if you can find out through their body language what is actually really going on, it's really important to just hold a bit of space and find out what's really going on for them. So just getting into granular stuff now, pricing a job and value. I know Catherine's on the call. We are continuously having these debates about budgets and valuing ourselves. You'll get a client come on a call, and we've all had these, and they go, well, we only have X budget, or we did it last year for X with X, but all we need is, so they're being reductive about how they're describing the project, or it's really not a huge piece of copy, or really not a huge piece of work. And the whole thing is like, well, we'll see. What you need to do with them then is, okay, so can you in an email, because a lot of clients don't give full briefs, write down what the brief is, and then I will respond with a broken down quote as to what it is. And the more detail they give you, like it's shit in, shit out. If they give you a bad brief, you're not going to respond with a good quote. So always try and pull out the best kind of brief you can from them in order to quote properly. And it's always that you have some clients who are absolutely brilliant at it. Like clients are very much more, they're maturer now. The business is more mature and they give good briefs, but sometimes they don't. So you need to nitpick away to find out what the actual detail is, and don't give broad stroke quotes. Like go initial quest, I break it down in such detail. I'm sure they're like, what is wrong with that woman? But, so they know all the different stages and the time you're putting against it. And if you have a really detailed quote back to the person, they go, oh yeah, that is right. We did have 3 discussions before we arrived at the deliverables, and Jane did spend time then researching that before we got into the actual job. So never be afraid to give a lot of detail in a quote, and also if it's a big piece of work, I would encourage you with a client, and this is more when you're in an agency, but say to them, that's a big piece of work doing your website. It's 3 months. I need to invoice you a WIP at the end of each month and get that in writing from them. And don't be afraid to ask for that either. In my life, someone said to me, well, you obviously don't charge enough, but I've always got paid within a few days of my, I say to them at the beginning, I don't do 30 days. You're using my skill set to help you in this month. So you need to pay me within 7 days. We're not, as I said to Peter earlier, we're not widgets from China. We're giving our, expertise, our 20 or 30 years experience. So kind of stand over that and be firm with them. I've also had people come on to calls with me when I give them my quote and they go, so your daily rate, will you reduce that because you're giving us loads of days? And I'm like, no, that is my rate, but I promise I will only charge you the hours I work. I don't charge half days or full days. It'll be literally, I give them detailed spreadsheets, time sheets basically, and that really helps them understand where I've put in the work. And so that kind of detail really helps in getting paid. So Julie, maybe onto the next one there. How to manage and control the finance conversation. Well, I've kind of touched on that there. We'll flick on to the next one. The main thing is scope. The holy grail is the scope. So when people are being vague or clients are being vague verbally, you get a lot of clients giving you verbal briefs. Sorry, that isn't going to work. They need to put it in writing. And if they don't put it in writing, you put it in writing back to them and get them to agree it before you move forward. And you will save yourself a whole load of grief. So scope, I've learned a lot in, you know, I was in Folk VML, fabulous agency for 3 years. I don't know if there's anybody on the call. And my line manager was Enda, absolutely loved him. He was brilliant. And when we used to do our quotes for Imposter, literally the deliverable page was longer than the quote sheet. So it was on the back page, the deliverables, and it just stopped scope creep and it stopped budgets going out of control and it kept the client in check. So super duper detail is the way to do it, and it's all in the scope. So if you do that well, you will, you know, as this slide says, understand the scope of the job and then educate your client back, because 80% of the work is done at the start with scopes of work and ways of working. So you need to put manners on them. You're in the business a long time. You are brilliant at what you do, all of you. I know how many senior people are on this call. You know, really stand over the work that you're doing and make sure you charge properly. And just on to the next one, Julie. I think we're near the end, guys, 1 or 2 minutes. On value, we'll flick on there. It is your quality of work, it's your reputation, and it's your experience, and that's your unique value, and don't forget that. So don't, and I know it's hard when times are down or there's a crash in business or things are dipping or interest rates and all these kind of things. Your value is still your value. So try and get your best price when you can. The next slide there, Julie, thanks a million. Yeah, you know this one. You probably all heard this story about the guy who goes out to fix a ship that nobody else could fix. And he comes up to the engine of the ship, hits it with the hammer, and it starts. And the guys go, wow, that was brilliant. You're brilliant. That was so quick. Oh my God. I mean, so many people come to look at this. He then sent them a bill. It's a true story, apparently, for €2 for tapping with a hammer and 9,998. I hope my maths is okay here. It's actually for knowing where to tap. So it's your expertise that they're buying, and you just need to learn to remind them. I think this is always a great story. So they're looking at this old fella, but he gets the job done quicker because he just knows all the shortcuts. So if you bear that in mind when you're quoting for things. And this is no offense to any of the guys here, but we're all feeding into the, excuse the type of the gender pay gap there when we don't insist on getting paid for our value. And I had my website done by a fabulous lady, a friend of Julie's, and she did an absolutely fantastic job. And after the job was done, I said to her, you undercharged me by about 30%. And I gave her a session on finance. I said, the added value you gave me, and you flipped it off. You said something about, oh, that'll only take me a minute doing the back end. I'm like, you should have had that on your quote to me, you know, highlighting your value. So remember to put all those little things that we can do super quickly into a quote, and it'll just make people value you better. And I'm just a real believer in that. So that's the end, guys. I know we're coming up to 5 minutes away from 2 o'clock.
Very good, Jane. Yeah.
And thank you for listening. And I know a lot of it was very practical, guys, but we just all need to be reminded, including myself. So in writing this, it helped me to remember to do all those things.